May 5th, 2026. I want you to just imagine for a second that you are standing right there in the Emirates Stadium in North London.
Oh, man.
Right. The air is just thick with smoke from the flares. The noise is, well, it's like a physical weight pressing against your chest. And then the final whistle blows.
Incredible.
It's confirmed. Arsenal has defeated Atletico Madrid 1-0 on the night, which means a 2-1 aggregate victory. And for the first time since 2006, Arsenal Football Club is actually going to the Champions League final.
Yeah, it's really hard to overstate what that moment means. I mean, waiting 20 years for a single moment of redemption, 2 whole decades.
Right. Just near misses, complete collapses, false dawns, and let's be honest, relentless mockery from rival fans.
Exactly. And, we usually expect sporting progress to be sort of linear, right? Like you build a team, they improve year on year, and then they win.
Yeah, a nice steady curve.
But this is something entirely different. It completely shatters that neat linear timeline.
Because when you look at that Tuesday night in North London, you aren't just analyzing a 90-minute football match.
Right.
You're really looking at this incredibly murky, complex, emotional landscape. It's the culmination of an entire generation's worth of anxiety, hope, and then finally catharsis, all just playing out on a meticulously manicured pitch.
And that is exactly what we are plunging into today. So welcome to this deep dive. We have got an amazing stack of sources today, a real contrast of the analytical and the completely visceral.
The best kind of mix.
Absolutely. We have the official match reports and all those deep dive statistical analytics from BBC Sport. But to really understand what this actually means to the people involved, we're combining those hard numbers with the raw, unfiltered emotional reactions from the fans themselves.
Pulling from Reddit, right.
Yes, pulling directly from the massive Reddit communities, specifically our Gunners and soccer.
Which is, honestly, the perfect way to approach an event of this magnitude. Because if you just read the stats, you just see a 1-0 win.
Yeah, a low-scoring game.
Exactly.
Right.
But if you just read the fan forums, you see pure hysteria. So the truth of how Arsenal actually shattered this 20-year glass ceiling, it exists right in the friction between those two realities.
That's beautifully put, and that's our mission today. For you, the listener, we are going to figure out the exact mechanisms behind this victory. We're going to pull apart Mikel Arteta's psychological manipulation of his squad.
Which was brilliant, by the way.
Oh, absolutely masterclass level. We'll also look at the sheer physical geometry of how their striker, Victor Gyökeres, just dismantled the opposition. Plus, we've got the tactical ghosts of Arsene Wenger's legendary 2006 run and, of course, the explosive joy of a fan base finally exercising its demons.
The stakes are just awe-inspiring.
They really are. So let's just jump straight in. Before a single ball was even kicked, the environment around the stadium was completely altered. Like, help me understand the scene outside the Emirates because it sounded insane.
It was. The BBC Sport report noted something that is genuinely unprecedented for this venue. For the very first time, the Arsenal supporters organized this massive, coordinated welcome for the team bus.
Wow.
Yeah, we are talking about thousands upon thousands of fans just lining the streets, lighting red flares, singing continuously. They created this incredibly hostile but also electrifying environment before the players even walked into the dressing room.
That's huge. And Arteta noticed it, right?
Oh, definitely. He actually noted in his post-match interview that it was special and unique. He explicitly stated that he had never felt that kind of energy there before.
I'm really glad you brought up the venue itself because the Emirates Stadium has carried a very specific reputation for a long time. For listeners who, might not follow the granular history of English football stadiums, Arsenal used to play at a place called Highbury.
Right, the legendary Highbury.
Exactly. It was famously compact, very historic, and highly intimidating for away teams. But when they moved to the massive modern Emirates Stadium in 2006, which is ironically the last year they made this final.
Right, the poetry of that is wild.
It is. But the new stadium got a reputation for being a bit corporate, like a bit sterile. People jokingly called it a library.
Yeah, the Highbury Library tag sort of followed them to the Emirates. And it makes sense because the architectural shift physically changed the acoustics and the demographics of the crowd.
Prices went up, different crowds came in.
Exactly. And for years, the team really struggled on the pitch, and the stadium reflected that anxiety. The crowd was known to turn on their own players very quickly if things went wrong. It was a nervous, heavy place to play.
But May 5th was the complete inversion of that history.
A total 180.
It was a total pressure cooker, just exploding. And you really, really feel that explosion when you read the firsthand fan reactions on Reddit. I have to share this one story because it just perfectly captures the pure, unadulterated madness of the night.
Oh, please do.
Okay, so this comes from a user named Lewis Red Plays. Now, he wasn't even at the stadium. He was on holiday in Torquay, which is this seaside town down in Devon.
Okay, quite away from North London.
Right. And he posted, and I quote, "I got smashed while on holiday watching the game, saying North London forever all over Torquay, and hurt myself while falling flat on my face after trying to Naruto run."
Haha, oh my God.
I know. And he finishes with, "Definitely worth it. One of the best nights of my life. The pure joy is overriding any remote feeling of a hangover."
That is fantastic. But, you know, if you look at the psychology of what he's describing there, it's actually really interesting.
Oh.
Well, the physical distance from North London didn't dilute the emotional impact for him at all. You have a grown adult running through a quiet seaside town, literally face-planting into the pavement and declaring it the best night of his life.
Yeah, that's not normal behavior for just a sports score.
No, exactly. That is a profound physiological release of tension. When you, as a collective fan base, hold on to this deep anxiety for 2 whole decades, the release of it manifests in almost absurd physical outbursts.
A 20-year holding of breath, and then they just exhale all at once. And you can contrast that wild, kind of goofy physical release with some deeply poignant personal stories from the fans, too.
Yeah, there are a lot of those on the subreddit.
There's this incredible anecdote from a user named Michaela. She wrote, let me find it here. "In 2006, I met my partner of 4 months from the train, miserable after Arsenal losing the Champions League final. In the 20 years we've been together, we've never seen a final. This year we get married. Could this year be awesome for another reason?"
See, that right there, that is why sports actually matter. Because they become the mile markers of our lives. If you think about Michaela and her partner, their entire relationship timeline exactly parallels Arsenal's absence from the Champions League final.
Oh, wow, you're right.
Every single anniversary they've had, every major life event, every holiday, it all occurred during this footballing drought. Their 20-year journey together is literally bookended by these 2 massive European moments.
It completely reframes what the victory means.
It does. It isn't just about the club making money or getting a trophy. It's about the lives that were lived in the spaces between these events.
That's so true. And you see other users like Redcat Bro simply posting, "We used to pray for times like these." Like, there are entire threads of fans saying they woke up the next morning and literally couldn't sleep.
Just staring at the ceiling.
Yeah. Going into work fueled entirely by adrenaline, it's just this collective delirium. But okay, let's bring it back from the living rooms and the Devon seaside towns right into the stadium ball itself. Yes, the symphony. Clarence Seedorf, who is, a legendary former player, he knows a thing or two about winning the Champions League. He was doing commentary for Amazon Prime.
Right.
And he observed the atmosphere and called it like a symphony. But he pointed out something very specific that I thought was fascinating. He said the fans weren't just cheering for goals or, exciting attacking runs down the wing. They were cheering defensive headers. They were cheering the ugly, difficult moments.
And that observation by Seedorf, it actually unlocks a crucial piece of tactical analysis for this game.
Really? Just from the crowd noise?
Yes, absolutely. Because normally a football crowd is primarily reactive. They sit there waiting for the team on the pitch to entertain them.
Right, do something to make me cheer.
Exactly. If the team attacks, the crowd cheers. If the team has to defend for long periods, the crowd gets nervous, they get quiet, maybe they groan. But what Seedorf observed was a proactively engaged crowd. By roaring for a simple defensive header or like a clearance into the stands, the crowd is actively reinforcing the hard, unglamorous work.
Okay, so I'm looking at Seedorf's quote, and I get the romanticism of it, but part of me is a little skeptical here.
Oh, really?
Yeah, because, look, these are elite athletes. They make tens of millions of dollars. They are highly trained to block out distractions and just focus entirely on the pitch. So does 60,000 people screaming actually change the physics of a football match? Or are we just sort of romanticizing it? Is this just a football myth?
I get why you'd think that, but it is absolutely not a myth. It fundamentally alters the operating environment of the match through cognitive load and momentum.
Okay, unpack that for me. Cognitive load.
Yeah. Think of the human brain under extreme physical stress. When a stadium is entirely unified and roaring for every minor victory, like a one throw-in or a successful sliding tackle, it provides a continuous stream of positive psychological reinforcement for the home team.
Like a constant drip of motivation.
Exactly, and neurologically, this triggers dopamine release, which has actually been proven to temporarily reduce an athlete's perception of physical fatigue.
Wait, really? It changes their physical limits?
Right. Yes. They can literally run faster for longer because the crowd noise is overriding their brain's internal fatigue signals.
That is wild. So the home team gets this massive biological boost. What happens to the away team? Do they just get intimidated?
It's worse than just intimidation. The cognitive load spikes massively. Look, football is a game of constant micro-communications. Players are constantly shouting to each other, right? Step up, drop back, man on your left.
Right. They have to organize the defensive line constantly.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But in an environment like the Emirates, on that night, verbal communication becomes entirely impossible. You cannot hear the guy 3 feet away from you.
Oh, wow.
So the Atletico Madrid players couldn't hear each other to organize their pressing triggers. They had to rely entirely on peripheral vision and pure instinct, which actually slows down reaction times by fractions of a second.
Because they're guessing instead of knowing.
Exactly. And in a Champions League semifinal, a fraction of a second is literally all a player like Victor Gyökeres needs to get past you. So yes, the symphony Seedorf described was a very functional, very real tactical weapon.
That makes so much sense. It's like the noise forces the away team into total isolation.
Perfectly said.
But, all that noise, all that neurological advantage we just talked about, it honestly doesn't mean a thing if the team's tactical foundation is leaky.
Right, you still have to play the game.
Exactly. Which brings us to the actual football played on the pitch. Let's look at the defensive echoes of 2006.
The parallels between this current team and that 2006 team are just striking. And the BBC Sports Stats highlight this beautifully. With this specific run to the 2026 final, Arsenal just broke their own club record. They have gone 13 games unbeaten in the Champions League.
Wait, 14? What was the previous record there?
The previous record was a 13-game unbeaten streak, and it was set exactly between March 2005 and April 2006.
No way. That is just poetic. It's literally 20 years to the day, basically, that they eclipse their own historical high-water mark.
It is. It's like the universe wrote the script.
Yeah.
And the foundation of both of these historic runs, 2 decades apart, is exactly the same. An impenetrable defense.
Yeah.
In this current 14-game run, Arsenal has kept 9 clean sheets. That is more than any other side in the competition.
9 clean sheets in 14 Champions League games it's absurd. Especially when you consider the sheer firepower of the elite teams they're facing in Europe. And this actually sparked a massive discussion on Reddit, especially surrounding Arsene Wenger's post-match assessment.
Ah, Wenger, of course.
Right. Wenger, who managed that legendary 2006 team, was on television analyzing the game. And he didn't overcomplicate things at all. He went straight to the point. To reach a European final, you must be strong defensively.
Wenger knows this intimately, specifically because of what he had to do in that 2006 campaign. The Reddit community, our Gunners, had a really fascinating debate reflecting on this.
What were they saying?
Well, a user pointed out that Wenger, who is a manager famous globally for beautiful, free-flowing, attacking football, right?
Yeah, Wenger ball.
Exactly. But he actually played a 4-5-1 formation for the very first time during that 2006 run.
Okay, for listeners who, don't spend their weekends drawing tactical maps on whiteboards, break down what a 4-5-1 formation actually means in practice and why a purist like Wenger was forced to use it.
Sure. So normally, Wenger played a 4-4-2 with 2 strikers up front, prioritizing offense and creating overloads. A 4-5-1 means you have 4 defenders, 5 midfielders, and only 1 striker.
So you're dropping an attacker.
Right. You are sacrificing an attacking player just to pack the middle of the pitch with bodies. And Wenger was forced into this because of a severe injury crisis. He was missing his star defenders. He had this completely makeshift backline featuring young, often error-prone players like Felix Senderos and Emmanuel Ibu.
Oh, man, the panic those names used to induce?
Haha, exactly.
Yeah.
And he had Jens Lehmann and Manuel Almunia basically sharing time and goal.
So if you have a makeshift, highly vulnerable defense like that, how does packing the midfield with 5 guys actually protect them?
Okay, imagine you live in a house with a very flimsy, broken front door.
Okay.
That door is your makeshift defense. If someone walks up to the door and just kicks it, it's going to break immediately. The 4-5-1 formation is the equivalent of putting 5 large security guards on your front lawn.
Ah, I love that.
Right. The opposing team has to physically fight their way through this dense thicket of midfielders before they can even get close enough to test that flimsy backline.
That makes total sense.
Yeah, it wasn't pretty, it wasn't Wenger ball, but that defensive solidity paired with Thierry Henry just producing moments of sheer individual magic up front, that's what got them to the final in Paris in 2006.
That is a brilliant way to picture it. Now, let's contrast that flimsy makeshift 2006 door with the absolute vault Arsenal has today.
Night and day.
Right. Because today, they don't need 5 security guards on the lawn because the door itself is literally made of titanium. They have a rock-solid, incredibly modern backline. Let's walk through who we are actually talking about here.
You have William Saliba and Gabriel Magalhaes in the center, who are just physical monsters, flanked by Ben White and Ricardo Calafiori.
All of them huge, fast, technical.
Exactly. And backing them up is David Raya in goal. This isn't a makeshift defense throwing bodies behind the ball. This is a group of elite players recruited and trained specifically to dominate their physical space.
And speaking of Raya, the BBC provided some underlying numbers for him, and frankly, I had to read them twice because they sound fake.
The expected goals stat.
Yes, they use a metric called expected goals, or XG, specifically the XG of shots on target he has faced. And the stat says Raya has prevented more goals, specifically plus 9.9, than any other goalkeeper in the Champions League since the start of last season. Walk me through how this math actually works because it sounds crazy.
Let's demystify expected goals on target because it's brilliant. It's basically a mathematical model that evaluates the absolute quality of every single shot a goalkeeper faces.
Okay.
It looks at exactly where the shot was taken from, the speed of the ball, the angle, and exactly where it was heading in the goal frame.
So not all shots are created equal.
Exactly. A shot from 30 yards out, heading straight down the middle right at the keeper has a very low XG. Almost anyone saves that.
Yeah.
But a shot from 6 yards out, heading for the top corner, that has a very high XG.
Okay, so the model calculates how many goals an average baseline professional goalkeeper should have conceded based on the exact difficulty of the shots fired at them.
You got it. The model looked at every single shot Raya faced over the last 2 seasons of the Champions League. It calculated that an average professional goalkeeper would have conceded roughly 23 goals from those specific shots.
Okay, 23 goals.
But Raya only conceded 13.
Wow.
Yeah. That gives him a plus 9.9 rating.
Yeah.
He practically erased 10 sure goals.
But how is he doing that? Like physically? Is he just leaping further? Is he guessing right more often? How does a single human being defy a mathematical average by 10 entire goals at the elite level?
It comes down to 2 things: his biomechanics and his starting position.
Oh, okay.
Raya plays incredibly high up the pitch. He acts as a sweeper keeper. By standing further away from his goal line, he is physically cutting down the angle the striker has to shoot at. He makes the physical goal look smaller to the attacker.
Geometry in action.
Exactly. And furthermore, his footwork is incredibly efficient. He takes these tiny micro steps to adjust his body weight before the striker even makes contact with the ball.
Anticipating the shot.
Yes, which allows him to launch into a dive fractions of a second faster than an average keeper. His individual brilliance literally saved Arsenal nearly 10 goals. And in knockout football, where the margins are razor thin, that is literally the difference between going out in the quarterfinals and booking the flight to Budapest.
That's just phenomenal. But here's the thing. Despite all this tactical brilliance, all the math, you still hear this tired narrative from rival fans and, honestly, even some television pundits who equate a good defense with being boring or playing negative football.
The boring Arsenal trope again.
Yeah. They want 5-4 thrillers. But on Reddit, a user named fperox pointed out that equating a defensive masterclass with being boring is incredibly naive.
And they are absolutely right. It's a fundamental misunderstanding of how elite teams are actually built.
I look at it like a high-wire act at a circus.
Okay, like those.
When you go to the circus, everyone watches the acrobat, right? The acrobat is the attacking player, the goal scorer. They are doing the flips, they're wearing the shiny outfit and getting all the applause.
Naturally.
But the only reason they can perform those flips, the only reason they don't fall to their deaths is the tension of the wire they are standing on. The defense is the wire. If the wire is slack, if it's unstable, the acrobat falls. If the defense is weak, the attackers are completely irrelevant because they are too terrified to take risks. They're constantly looking over their shoulders.
That is a phenomenal analogy. A strong defense doesn't inhibit the attack. It actually enables it.
Right.
It provides the psychological safety net that allows the creative players to push forward and take massive risks without fearing that a single mistake will cost them the game. Arsene Wenger's quote, reinforces this perfectly. He built teams known globally for beautiful attacking football, but he openly acknowledged that European immortality is built on defensive bedrock. You literally have to pull the wire tight before you can dance on it.
Beautifully said. But a high wire doesn't string itself up, right? You need an architect, a manager who micromanages the psychology of his players so the wire doesn't snap under the immense tension of a semifinal.
Which brings us to Arteta.
Exactly. Let's look at what Mikel Arteta did, because his masterclass in motivation and ego management is just fascinating.
Arteta's influence on this tie cannot be overstated, and we have to contextualize the immense pressure he's operating under here. This is an Arsenal side trying to end a 22-year wait for a Premier League title while simultaneously navigating a Champions League semi-final.
The weight of history on this squad is basically suffocating.
Right. And in the middle of this pressure cooker, Arteta makes a tactical decision that completely shocked everyone. He decided to start 19-year-old Miles Lewis-Skelly in the midfield alongside Declan Rice.
I remember seeing the team sheet an hour before kickoff and my jaw dropped.
Same.
Like, starting a 19-year-old kid in a Champions League semifinal against hardened, cynical veterans like Koke and Marcus Llorente. I mean, these are guys who've been playing elite European football since Lewis-Skelly was literally in elementary school.
Yeah, it's true.
It feels reckless. If the margins are so thin, like we just said, why on earth would a manager take that massive of a risk?
Well, because it wasn't a gamble to Arteta. It was a calculated deployment built on his intimate knowledge of the player's psychology. Declan Rice gave a very illuminating interview to Amazon Prime after the match that explains this perfectly. Rice said the team wasn't surprised at all by the lineup.
Really? The locker room was fine with it.
Totally fine. He mentioned that last year, when Lewis-Skelly was just 18, he stepped up in a massive away game at Real Madrid in the Bernabeu. And Rice noted that Arteta has been incredibly demanding and tough on the kid behind the scenes for years. He said Lewis-Skelly is constantly in the gym early, doing the unseen work.
Okay, so what looks like a wild, desperate gamble to us watching on TV is actually the culmination of months or years of rigorous psychological stress testing.
Precisely. Arteta didn't just throw him in the deep end hoping he could swim. He spent 2 years teaching him exactly how to navigate the current. He knew the teenager had the mental fortitude for the occasion.
And it paid off.
Massively. The data backs it up completely.
Yeah.
Lewis-Skelly walked away with a 7.88 average rating on the BBC Player Rater. He didn't just survive the midfield battle against those veterans, he dictated parts of it.
That's incredible. But, you know, Arteta's management wasn't just about trusting youth. It was also about handling the massive egos and emotions of the senior players.
The apology.
Yes. There is a specific quote from Arteta's post-match interview that really stuck with me. He revealed that on the afternoon of the match, literally hours before the biggest game of their lives, he called certain senior players into his office.
Which sounds like a standard meeting, but...
Right, but he brought them in specifically to apologize to them for not putting them in the starting lineup.
Which is a remarkable, almost counterintuitive piece of man management.
Isn't it? Why would the boss apologize? Usually managers project absolute authority. I am the boss, this is the team, deal with it.
Right, the old school dictator method.
Yeah. And you usually hear about players sulking or their agents leaking frustration to the press when they get dropped for a big game. But Arteta said their reaction to his apology was, "Boss, I'm here when you need me." And then they gave him a hug. Let's unpack the psychology of that interaction. What happens when a multi-millionaire star player is benched for a semifinal?
Their ego is bruised.
Massively.
Exactly. They feel isolated, they feel unvalued, and if left unchecked, that resentment acts like a poison in the dressing room. What Arteta is doing by bringing them into his office and apologizing is preemptively neutralizing that poison.
He's getting ahead of it.
Yes. He validates their disappointment. He looks them in the eye and says, "You deserve to play, and it genuinely hurts me not to pick you." But by doing so, he also demands their emotional support.
Right. It's trade-off.
Exactly.
Yeah.
He effectively says, "I've shown you respect, now you owe the team your energy." It ensures there are absolutely no fractured agendas sitting on the substitute bench.
Right.
Everyone is pulling in the exact same direction.
And you can see that unity in how the players talk to the media. Declan Rice summarized this culture shift perfectly. He talked about how things used to hurt the club over the last few years, sort of alluding to their painful, successive second-place finishes in the Premier League.
Those title collapses were brutal. They were. But he said Arteta has taken full control. They kept building, pushing each other, and now they have gone full throttle. He also admitted they went through a stage earlier in the season where they were a bit sloppy, but they found a new way to play.
That adaptation is key, isn't it?
It is. Wayne Rooney was actually working as a pundit for the match, and he noted the squad's new maturity. And former Arsenal defender Matthew Upson echoed this on BBC Radio 5 Live. Upson pointed out that to beat a team like Atletico Madrid, you have to show real grit. He said it's worth going through the pain.
Okay, let's talk about that pain, because playing a team managed by Diego Simeone is a very, very specific type of agony.
Oh, absolutely.
Atletico Madrid are famous for the dark arts, but what does that actually mean functionally on a football pitch? Like, to a casual viewer, they just look annoying.
Functionally, the dark arts are about rhythm destruction.
Rhythm destruction.
Yeah. Atletico Madrid doesn't just want to stop you from scoring. They want to frustrate you into making a mistake yourself. It involves tactical fouling, kicking a player just hard enough to stop an attack, but maybe not quite hard enough to get a yellow card.
Or doing it in rotation so no one gets sent off.
Exactly, rotating the fouls. It involves surrounding the referee, screaming for decisions, taking 2 full minutes to take a throw-in, faking injuries to break the opponent's momentum when they have the upper hand.
Just constant disruption.
Constant. And for a young, highly technical team like Arsenal, the temptation is to get angry, to retaliate, to lose focus on the football.
And if you retaliate, you get a red card and the game is just gone.
Exactly. So the maturity Rooney highlighted is Arsenal's ability to maintain their composure through all of that noise. They didn't get drawn into the emotional trap. When the tie was balanced on a knife edge at 1-1 on aggregate, they didn't panic. They methodically, clinically worked for their opening.
Okay, so the high wire is tight. The manager has everyone's ego completely in check, and they are surviving the dark arts.
They're doing everything right.
But surviving isn't winning. Eventually, you have to actually land a punch. You have to score a goal. And that brings us to the Swedish juggernaut, Viktor Gyökeres.
Yes, Gyökeres was the absolute focal point of this victory. I mean, he earned the Player of the Match award with an incredible 8.72 average rating from the fans.
Almost a perfect 9.
Yeah. And his role in the game-winning goal, which came in the 44th minute right before halftime, was a complete masterclass in center-forward play.
Let's slow that goal down and look at it second by second, because if you just look at the stat sheet, it says Bukayo Saka scored it. It says Leandro Trossard took the initial shot that the Atletico goalkeeper, Jan Oblak, parried.
Right.
Gyökeres doesn't even get an assist on the stat sheet for that goal, but you're saying he was the architect.
He was entirely the architect through his movement off the ball. The BBC report details how Gyökeres was constantly running the channels in the build-up.
Okay, for the uninitiated, define running the channels for me.
Sure. Imagine the defensive line of 4 players across the back. The channel is the vertical space directly between the opposing center back and the fullback.
So the gap between them.
Exactly. It's a notoriously awkward area because both defenders are unsure whose responsibility it is to cover the runner.
Do I track him or do you?
Right. And Gyökeres continuously sprinted into those awkward spaces over and over. By doing so, he physically dragged the massive Atletico center backs completely out of position. He forced their defense to collapse inward just to deal with his sheer physical threat.
So he's creating a vacuum.
Exactly. Because the defenders panicked and converged on Gyökeres, it created a massive pocket of space at the edge of the penalty area for Leandro Trossard to run into completely unmarked.
Ah, I see.
So Trossard takes a shot, Oblak makes the save, and Saka is right there to tap in the rebound. Gyökeres didn't touch the ball in the final sequence, but his spatial manipulation is what made the goal mathematically possible.
That's brilliant. Theo Walcott was doing commentary, and he remembered Arteta saying he bought Gyökeres specifically to destroy defenses.
A great quote.
And Walcott said that against Atletico, they truly felt that. He just bullied the back line. And you see this all reflected in the Reddit comments, too. Like, a user named MindlessRepair2204 wrote, Gyökeres absolutely bullied that defense. What a performance.
Yeah, the fans love him.
Another user pointed out that he has scored 21 goals this season while still adjusting to a completely new team, praising his elite mentality.
But you know, the most revealing insight about Gyökeres didn't actually come from a pundit or a fan. It came from his manager.
What did Arteta say?
Arteta said, and this is crucial, you talk about Gyökeres, and he's the first one to set the tone, the rhythm, and the habits that he shows when we don't have the ball, and that's a team effort.
Wait, I need to pause here because this actually confuses me.
Good.
Gyökeres is a massive 6'2" striker. His primary job is to score goals, right? He acts as a battering ram in the box. But Arteta's praising him for setting the tone defensively. Like, when Arsenal doesn't even have the ball, How does a striker defending actually change the game that much?
Because modern football is highly, highly interconnected. The way a striker defends dictates everything that happens 50 yards behind him on the pitch.
Explain that to me.
Let me explain the mechanism of a high-intensity press. When Atletico Madrid has the ball at the back, trying to build up a play, Gyökeres doesn't just casually jog toward them. He sprints at the center back with maximum intensity.
Okay, so he's pressuring the ball handler.
But it's how he pressures it that matters. He curves his run to physically block off certain passing lanes. By sprinting at the defender from a very specific angle, he forces that defender to make a rushed decision, and he limits their angle of vision. He effectively cuts the pitch in half.
Oh, wow.
The opposing team can literally only pass in the direction Gyökeres allows them to.
I see. It's like a snowplow.
A snowplow.
Yeah, like he isn't just hitting the defense blindly. He's physically clearing a specific path, forcing all the debris, or in this case, the play, into one predictable lane.
That's a perfect way to visualize it. Because Gyökeres acts as a snowplow, forcing the pass into one predictable lane, the game becomes entirely readable for the Arsenal midfielders waiting behind him.
Because they know where it's going.
Exactly. Declan Rice and Lewis Skelly know exactly where the ball is going to go before it's even kicked. Because of that predictability, they can step up and intercept it aggressively. Gyökeres' violent work rate at the very front is the catalyst that makes the entire defensive structure function.
So it all starts with him.
If he gets lazy and doesn't press, the opposition center back has time to look up, pick a long diagonal pass, bypass the midfield entirely, and suddenly the Arsenal defense is totally exposed.
Oh.
He is literally the tip of the spear in both attack and defense.
That completely changes how you watch a game. You aren't just watching where the ball is, you have to watch the snowplow.
Exactly.
But okay, the snowplow gets them the lead. But getting over the finish line in a Champions League semifinal isn't a victory lap. It requires navigating some incredibly nerve-wracking moments.
Oh, the tension was unbearable.
Let's look at those final 10 minutes, the nerves and how the fans are coping as they look ahead to the final.
The final 10 minutes were agonizing. The BBC Live reporting captured the tension perfectly. Arsenal mostly controlled the possession, but Atletico are incredibly dangerous on the counterattack. And interestingly, the main danger came from Giuliano Simeone.
Wait, Simeone, any relation to the manager?
Yes.
No.
He is remarkably the son of the Atletico manager, Diego Simeone. And Giuliano had two massive opportunities right at the end to break Arsenal's hearts.
Walk me through those chances because I know the fans were holding their breath.
The first one required an absolutely brilliant last-ditch recovery tackle from Declan Rice right inside the penalty box.
Which is terrifying.
Exactly. If Rice gets that tackle wrong by even an inch, it's a penalty for Atletico and probably a red card for Rice.
The razor-thin margins we talked about earlier, and the second chance.
The second opportunity was even more dangerous.
Yeah.
Simeone managed to beat the offside trap. He was totally one-on-one with David Raya. He actually rounded the goalkeeper.
Oh.
The net was completely empty. But Gabriel Magalhães had sprinted back and made this desperate sliding challenge from behind to stop him from tapping it in. Atletico screamed for a penalty, but the referee waved it away. It was an incredibly tight call.
My heart rate is going up just hearing about it.
Yeah.
And we can't forget Alexander Sorloth, the Atletico substitute, who had a massive missed chance right at the very end. A Reddit user commented, "Sorloth will be staring at the ceiling all night thinking about that missed chance."
Yeah, that one will haunt him.
Now, Arsenal had their own chances to kill the game off Carr. Gyökeres missed a close-range header from a Piero Hincapie cross, but they ultimately just had to hold on for dear life. And you can see how the fans are coping with these intense nerves as they look ahead to the final on May 30th in Budapest against either Paris Saint-Germain or Bayern Munich.
The anticipation is wild.
It is, and the rival banter on Source Soccer is at an absolute boiling point right now.
The tribalism on Reddit right now is a fascinating psychological study in itself. On the France Soccer post-match thread, you see an immense amount of pushback from rival fans. They're desperately trying to devalue Arsenal's achievement.
What are they saying?
They claim Arsenal had an easy run to the final. They claim they were favored by the referees, specifically pointing to that Gabriel tackle on Simeone. One user flatly claimed, "The refs want them to win, I guess, every decision going their way." Another simply called them a disgusting club.
Wow, just straight to the insults. And the Arsenal fans defend this fiercely, don't they?
Oh, absolutely.
They refuse to let anyone put an asterisk on this run. They point out that they earned their path. They went 8-0 in the group stage. A user named Hardcore Lawn summed it up perfectly, saying they earned the path themselves by winning all their group stage matches and finishing first. That's how it worked.
Right, you play who's in front of you.
Exactly.
Yeah.
They dismantled Bayern Munich 3-1 earlier in the tournament. They beat Inter Milan. They beat Sporting. They didn't exactly play a bunch of amateurs.
No, they didn't. And this back and forth really highlights how sustained success alters public perception.
How so?
Well, when Arsenal were struggling 5 or 6 years ago, they were often pitied. They were mocked as a soft touch, a team that would easily fold under pressure. Rival fans didn't really mind them because they simply weren't a threat.
Right. It's easy to be nice to the guy in sixth place.
Exactly. But now that they are physically dominant and defensively impregnable, they are a massive existential threat to those rival clubs. So rival fan bases instinctively look for ways to attribute their success to luck or referees. It is a psychological defense mechanism to cope with the reality of Arsenal's resurgence.
But for the Arsenal fans, there's also a profound sense of poetic justice in this specific victory over Atletico Madrid. I found this thread on Reddit just brilliant.
The revenge narrative.
Yes. A user named Trinvenge pointed out a massive historical connection. Back in 2018, Arsenal made it to the Europa League semifinal. It was Arsene Wenger's final season at the club. And who knocked them out?
Yeah.
Atletico Madrid. Specifically, Antoine Griezmann scored the vital goal that essentially ruined Wenger's European farewell. And now, in 2026, Arsenal has knocked out Atletico, potentially ruining Antoine Griezmann's final European campaign before he retires.
It comes full circle.
It does. Another user brilliantly replied, so this is a revenge.
Haha, revenge is perfect. The narrative arcs in football can literally take a decade to resolve, but when they finally do, it is incredibly satisfying for the supporters. It ties off all these emotional loose ends.
It really does.
Hopeless.
But as we look ahead to Budapest, I have to reflect on the immense physical and psychological burden of what they are actually trying to achieve. Because, they're still in the hunt for the Premier League title, too.
Right, the double.
They are chasing the double. Help me understand the physical reality of trying to win both of these massive trophies at the exact same time.
To win the double, meaning the domestic league and the Champions League in one season, is statistically one of the hardest things to do in modern team sports. You have to play upwards of 50 to 60 high-intensity matches over 9 months.
Which is what, like running a half marathon twice a week while people are actively kicking your shins?
Precisely. The physical muscle fatigue is staggering, but the mental burnout is often worse. In the final month of the season, you are playing a must-win game every 3 days.
Every 3 days.
Yes. One slip-up, one draw in the league, and the title is gone. One bad half in Europe, and you are knocked out. The cognitive fatigue of having to be absolutely perfect every 72 hours usually causes teams to crack.
I look at it like carrying 2 massive boulders up a very steep hill. You are 4 games away from immortality. Can a team actively carry both of those boulders simultaneously without the sheer weight of the pressure crushing them?
History tells us it is incredibly rare. However, if we look back at the mechanisms we've discussed today, Arteta's ego management, the unified tactical structure where a striker defends like a midfielder, and that proactive, energy-giving atmosphere created by the fans' Arsenal has built a resilient framework.
They're built for the boulders.
They are. They aren't trying to ignore the pressure of the boulders. They are actively using it as fuel. As Declan Rice said, they are going full throttle.
So what does this all mean? Let's take a step back and sort of summarize this incredible story. We have just unpacked the culmination of a 20-year wait.
2 decades.
This is the longest period between Champions League finals for an English side since Liverpool's famous wait ended back in 2005. Arsenal got here not through luck, but through historic defensive mastery, keeping 9 clean sheets by essentially putting a titanium door on their penalty box.
The high wire's tight.
Exactly. They got here through Mikel Arteta's unifying leadership, literally apologizing to players to neutralize locker room poison. They got here through Victor Gyökeres acting as a snowplow, dominating the pitch's geometry, and they got here fueled by the euphoric, visceral release of a fan base that roared for defensive headers and literally fell flat on their faces in seaside towns out of pure joy.
It is a profound testament to the power of a long-term vision. It shows what is actually possible when a group of people navigate years of disappointment, adapt to their failures, and painstakingly rebuild their foundation.
And that leads me to something I want you, the listener, to really think about. We've just spent this time talking about a football club that spent 20 years rebuilding, failing, adapting, and trying again to finally reach the pinnacle.
Right.
So, what 20-year project in your own life is worth staying resilient for? What is your personal Champions League final that requires you to weather the setbacks, ignore the outside noise, and just keep pushing forward?
That's a vital way to contextualize it. The resilience demonstrated by the club and the fans isn't just about sports. It is a blueprint for long-term human endeavor.
It really is. But I want to leave you with a final, slightly provocative thought to mull over, something that wasn't explicitly debated in the Reddit threads but is looming on the horizon.
Okay, what is it?
If Arsenal manages to win the final in Budapest on May 30th and secure this historic double, it entirely rewrites their modern history. Unquestionably.
But does ultimate success immediately erase the underdog identity a fan base has held onto for 2 decades? Arsenal fans are used to fighting the establishment, feeling slighted by referees, feeling like the world is against them. If they win it all, they become the undisputed Goliath of Europe.
That's a massive shift.
Are the fans truly ready for the burden of being Goliath, where every victory is simply expected and a single draw is treated as a crisis?
That transition changes the entire psychology of a fan base. Moving from the hunter to the hunted requires a completely different emotional toolkit, and it's often a very uncomfortable adjustment.
It really is, because when you step into the world of ultimate success, suddenly that murky emotional landscape becomes a very bright, very unforgiving spotlight. The tension on the wire only gets tighter. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into footballing history. Stay curious.